Hello, and thank you for choosing this clean historical Western romance by Emma Ashwood. Before we begin, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Your support allows us to keep sharing more wonderful stories for free. So grab a cozy spot, kick back, and let this story whisk you away to a different time and place. Enjoy. Copyright Emma Ashwood. Lillian's Secret by Emma Ashwood. Chapter 1. 1874. Providence, Rhode Island. Lillian Kincaid glanced out of the classroom window longingly. The rays of the sun painted the red cedars a startling shade of red that made Lillian want to be outside, seated under the towering trees. Summer in Providence was short, and every moment spent indoors seemed like a waste of time. Perhaps after her class, she could convince her mother to take her and her sister to the beach. Lillian reluctantly turned her attention back to the needlework picture she was working on. Despite the constant distractions, Lillian enjoyed her embroidery class, unlike her younger sister Marion, who found it an awful bore. She had picked a seaside landscape and was now working on finalizing it. Thoughts of the summer left her as she thought of her pictorial hanging in the parlor in their home. She was now stitching her name and age at the bottom of the cloth. "Very good, Miss Kincaid," Mrs. Hanson, who ran the class, said to her. Lillian beamed. She had put a lot of work into her piece. She wanted her mother and father to feel proud of her. Perhaps her good work would make it easier for them to bear Marion's disinterest in the classes. Still, Marion was still young at 10 years old. Perhaps in a few years her interest would grow. An hour later, Lillian stood outside Marion's class, waiting as the girls who made up the class filed out. She beamed when she saw her younger sister and then draped her hand around her when she got closer. "I don't need to ask how your class went," Lillian teased her. Marion made a face. The two sisters linked arms and walked out onto the tree-lined road where their carriage would be waiting to take them home. "I want to ask Mother if she can take us to the beach this afternoon," Lillian said. Marion shrugged. "Mother never has time for such things." "That's not fair, Marion." "She did take us last summer," Lillian cried out. "Yes, once," Marion said in an annoyingly calm voice. "Well, maybe," Lillian grudgingly admitted. "It's her work, you know. A lot of people in Providence need her." The carriage soon pulled up into a cobbled drive and stopped in front of a 2-story home with bracketed cornice on a 2-acre lot with a well-maintained lawn. Lillian hopped out first, followed by Marion in a more leisurely fashion. "Mother," Lillian called out as soon as she opened the front door. She could hear voices drifting into the hallway from the kitchen, and she followed the sound. "Do you know the Swains have not left their home for the shame of it? Why, can you imagine your son running off with the maid?" her mother was saying, the tone of her voice rising by an octave. Their cook, Mrs. Rosenfield, made appropriate noises of indignation. "People should stick to their own sort," she sniffed. "My sentiments exactly," Lillian's mother said. "Surely the Swains should not be judged too harshly," Lillian said. "They can't control what their children do." "How many times have I told you girls that eavesdropping is a sign of ill breeding?" her mother said, glaring at Lillian. "I wasn't eavesdropping," Lillian protested. "You just didn't hear me come in." "Mother, can you take us to the beach this afternoon?" Marion asked, mercifully changing the topic. Their mother smoothed down the skirts of her dress and stood up, adopting a brisk countenance. "I'm afraid not," she said, moving towards the door. "I'm expected in a meeting to raise funds for the orphanage." "You never have time to take us anywhere," Marion moaned. Their mother whipped round, her green eyes blazing. "How dare you say such a thing, you ungrateful child? What don't you have?" "Those poor children in the orphanage depend on people like us to ensure that they get a full meal every day. And here you are, moaning about the beach," she spat. Marion threw her head and hand back and in the process knocked a bowl over on the kitchen counter. Fortunately, it was empty. Regrettably, it broke into tiny pieces as soon as it hit the floor. "You're so clumsy. When will you ever stop?" their mother shouted, and then she marched out. Marion's eyes were full of tears. Knowing how much her sister hated anyone seeing her tears, Lillian busied herself with picking up the broken pieces. Later that evening, over dinner, she and her sister Marion ate their lamb and potatoes quietly as their mother regaled to their father, a jolly man with balding hair, tales of her day. "What about you, Pa? How was your day?" Marion intervened when there was a pause. Lillian saw the look of irritation that crossed her mother's features, and she tensed. Her mother looked away, concentering on cutting up a potato into tiny pieces. "I'm afraid the bank is no fun, Marion. Your mother's days are certainly more interesting than mine," he said, and then turned back to his wife. "What were you saying, Mabel?" Before answering, Lillian's mother shot Marion a triumphant look. Lillian did not understand the relationship between her mother and sister. It was as if they were in competition over everything. She shrugged and continued eating her dinner. Only when they were eating their chocolate cake did their father turn back to them. That he adored his wife was no doubt to Lillian. She liked it. It gave her fantasies, a certain kind of sweetness, as she imagined her future husband treating her with the same reverence that her father showed her mother. "What are your plans for tomorrow, my girls?" he inquired. "I'm hoping to finish my pictorial tomorrow," Lillian said. Marion did not answer, choosing to scowl instead. Without warning, their mother banged the table with one hand. "I don't understand you. What is it now? Your father is addressing you, Marion." Chapter 2. Their mother rarely beckoned them into her chambers. Lillian thought, as she and Marion went up the stairs. The wooden banister felt dusty under her hand, which trailed along it as she climbed the stairs. The house had fallen into disrepair since her mother had let the maid go. The cook sulked whenever she was asked to clean, and it was left to her and Marion to clean up when they got home from their classes. They did a shoddy job of it, Lillian admitted to herself. Their mother never helped. She was constantly in and out of their father's bedroom, more often than not, emerging in tears and locking herself up in her chambers for hours. Lillian longed for her home to return to normal. Every evening, she went down on her knees and said an earnest prayer for her pa. He held their family together. Without him, their mother was buckling, and their home held no resemblance to what it had been months earlier. There was no laughter or even loud voices, apart from the whispered conversations she and Marion shared. Lillian reached the landing. Her stomach was in knots. She knew it was something to do with her father. Without her being aware of it, her right-hand fingers went to her mouth. By the time they got to their mother's chambers at the end of the hallway, her fingernails were bleeding. Marion was walking ahead of her, and she pushed the door open without knocking. Oh, why did her sister do such things just to annoy their mother? Lillian prepared herself for the onslaught that would follow. To her surprise, her mother sat quietly on the chair at the dressing table. Her green eyes watched them from the mirror. Lillian's fingers went to her mouth again. Her father's accident had taken a toll on her mother, and it suddenly hit her just how much. She looked old, and her shoulders sagged. Lillian wanted to rush to her and tell her that all would be well. Except it was 2 months now since the accident, and her father had neither regained the use of his legs nor risen from his bed. Lillian had seen him less than 5 times. On her last visit, she had entered his bedroom just as the male attendant was helping him from the bed. She closed her eyes now as the images of his mangled legs came to her mind. And she had known, somewhere at the back of her mind, that he would not get better. Oh, why did it have to happen to her pa? He was the kindest man on earth who never wished anybody any harm. In her rational mind, Lillian knew that accidents happened to anybody. If only he had not picked that Saturday to have his hair cut. The carriage had hit him as he absent-mindedly crossed the street. The 2 horses pulling the carriage had panicked and crushed her poor pa's legs in their bewilderment. Seeing his disfigured legs had not caused Lillian to keep her distance. It was his reaction when he saw her standing there, her jaw open. "Get the hell out of here. What do you want? To see these?" He had snarled and then proceeded to hurl the blanket that half covered his legs onto the floor. Lillian had screamed and run out, his insults following her down the hallway and the stairs. He hated her. She didn't know why, but he seemed to hate all of them. She had heard him screaming at their mother and once at Marion. Girls, As you well know, things have not been the same since your father's accident, their mother now said, her voice detached. He's out of work, which means that we'll have to make some readjustments until he's well enough to return to work. She stopped to clear her throat. I'm sorry, but we must discontinue your classes, as important as they are, she said. Her detached tone was replaced by a bitter one. Your father promises me that within a few months, things should go back to normal, but in the meantime, she shrugged. Oh, am I glad to drop those classes, Marian said happily, and then on realizing her mistake, she sobered up. Lillian, meanwhile, was looking at her mother through the mirror in amazement. Mother, what are you talking about? She dared. I'm sorry, Lillian. I know you love those classes, she said sadly. Lillian shook her head. I'm not talking about the classes, Mother, she said. I'm talking about Pa. Have you seen him? Of course I've seen him. Her mother snapped. I see him every day. Then you know he's not getting better, Lillian said. Her mother shot out of her chair and came to a stand an inch from Lillian. She poked her hard on the chest with her forefinger. How dare you, she hissed. He's going to be fine. Mother, Lillian said as patiently as she could. Pa doesn't do the exercises the doctor suggested to strengthen his legs. We should think of long-term plans. He may never return to work. You're an evil girl, Lillian. That's what you are. How can you say that about your father? Her voice had fallen, and she had tears in her eyes. Lillian's heart tugged with sympathy for her mother, but the sooner she accepted their reality, the better it would be for all of them. Mother, Lillian said, ignoring her mother's words. We ought to sell the house and get something smaller, somewhere we can afford. We've already let the maid go, and if we get somewhere smaller, we can let Mrs. Rosenfield go too. Her mother's hands flew to her ears, blocking out Lillian's words. When she finally dropped them, her green eyes were blazing and spittle flew as she spoke. Get her out of my sight, Lillian, now, she screamed. Lillian trudged out, her legs heavy. At 15 years old, she felt like an old woman. Chapter 3. Lillian's back ached. She was stooped over the rich velvet material, carefully sewing on a button. Her eyes hurt too as the light in the back room was not so good. She glanced at her watch. 20 more minutes to noon, and she could leave for the day. The store opened 7 days a week, with half days on Sundays. It was her 4th year working in the dress shop under the proprietorship of Miss Jane, as she insisted Lillian address her. She was kind as an employer and had taught Lillian a lot about clothes. The new knowledge had only strengthened Lillian's resolve never to work in a dress shop again. The customers were ungrateful. Wealthy women who spoke to her as though she was vermin, some of whom had been her mother's friends, and now acted as if they did not know her. Lillian sighed. She had learnt much over the last 4 years, notably how quickly so-called friends dropped acquaintanceships once they realized the change in financial circumstances. Lillian felt even more for her mother. Her and Marian had managed to adapt to their new way of life. They still lived in their too-big house, the paint on the front facade now peeled off, and the once neat lawn now overgrown with grass and weeds. She had been the first to get a job, followed months later by her mother, who worked as a doctor's receptionist. Every evening, she and Marian listened to a tirade of complaints about the lowly people she was forced to deal with. Sometimes Lillian wanted to shake her slim shoulders so that their reality could penetrate. Miss Jane chose that moment to waltz into the room. The 50-something-year-old lady never simply walked into a room. She performed every activity as though she was on stage. Still, she had a kindly heart and had kept Lillian on even after realizing that she had never worked before. Now, my dear, it's time we shut the doors, don't you think? How are you spending your Sunday afternoon? Have you taken a peek outside? It's a glorious day. Lillian disliked beautiful, glorious days. They reminded her of all she had lost and the gloom that awaited her back home, no matter how much the sun shone. My lady friends and I have lined up a game of tennis. Not that I'm any good at it, she erupted into a string of giggles. What about you, Lillian? I haven't decided yet, Lillian stuttered. Well, you young people have endless choices. Why, you could go to the seaside. Us older ladies cannot afford to expose our legs, she said, and erupted into more laughter. Lillian was bone-tired and could not even manage a chuckle. She stood up, shook the bits of thread off her dress, and then carefully folded the gown she had been working on. She made to take a broom when Miss Jane waved her away. "Go on home. You can clean up tomorrow morning when you come in. Now don't forget your sister's dress." "I won't," Lillian said, managing a weary smile. "Thank you ever so much, Miss Jane. She'll be mighty grateful for it." With the brown parcel tucked under her arms, Lillian walked down the street and headed home. She forced her stiff legs to move. She felt so tired as though she would collapse on the street. Lillian only realized that the parcel had slipped from her arm when she had walked a few steps. "Ma'am, did you drop this?" a deep, rich voice said. Lillian turned to find the most handsome man she had ever laid eyes on. His lips were curled into a hint of a smile, but her eyes were drawn to his hair. He had a mop of unruly, blonde curls that seemed to have a life of their own. He said, smiling and gesturing at his head, "Despite my wild hair, I am truly a gentleman." Lillian giggled. She looked him from top to bottom. Prosody %. He wasn't wearing a hat, as was custom with most gentlemen, but he did carry off an obviously expensive suit. Lillian shook her head free of those thoughts. It was a shame how much one noticed when they did not have money. "Ernest Spaulding at your service," he said, and then bowed low. This time, Lillian laughed out. She took her parcel, which he held out to her. "Does such a beautiful lady have a name?" he asked. "My name's Lillian Kincaid," she said, feeling suddenly shy. "May I walk a little way with you?" he asked. Good manners had taught her to say no to such obvious flirtations, but after all she had been through, the idea of spending a little time with him seemed like a ray of sunshine. "Very well," Lillian said. He took the parcel from her. "I shall carry this. It's too heavy for you." Lillian smiled, and as they strolled, she felt the weight lift from her shoulders. Ernest had a way of speaking that made her laugh. He was much taller than her, and every once in a while he looked down on her face, making her skin grow warm. He took her all the way to the driveway that led to her home. "Will I ever see you again?" he asked dramatically. Lillian looked down. She felt loath to leave his company, but she knew even being with him without her mother's knowledge could get her into untold trouble. "Have yourself a lovely evening," he said, and touched her cheek. Lillian felt as though her whole body was in flames. She looked up at him. He looked at her as though she was the prettiest creature he had seen in years. Unable to bear his scrutiny much longer, Lillian took her parcel and turned. She could feel his eyes boring into her. When she reached the front door, she turned back once. His eyes were still on her. She pushed the door open and fled inside. Chapter 4. "Marian," Lillian yelled as she entered the front door. There was no answer. The house was deathly quiet, and she felt a tremor vibrate through her body. She searched the living room, dining room, and kitchen. Now running, Lillian rushed up the stairs. She paused outside her pa's room, her hand poised on the knob. No, she would check Marian's room first. She knocked lightly and pushed the door open. Marian's room spoke of neglect, as did the rest of the house. The flowered wallpaper had peeled from the walls, and the rugs on the floor were worn and old. Sounds of muffled crying reached her, and she ventured deeper into the room. She saw Marian then, seated on the edge of the bed, her head buried in her hands, her shoulders shaking. "Marian," Lillian cried out. "What is it? What's wrong? Is Pa all right?" Marian dropped her hands and stared at Lillian with red-brimmed eyes. "I can't do it, Lillian," she sobbed. "I can't take care of Pa anymore. He shouts at me all the time. Nothing makes him happy." Lillian sighed deeply and sat down next to her sister. The years had made her see her Pa's situation in a different light. Although she still kept her distance, she felt as though she understood him better. "Marian, Pa's just frustrated and taking it out on you because you're the one who is always with him," Lillian explained. "Imagine how difficult it is for him knowing that his wife and daughter have to go out and work, and his youngest daughter is his minder." Marian's sobs ceased. "He took such good care of us. Why can't he let us do the same for him?" Marian said. "Because he's a man, that's why," Lillian said. "Men are different. They feel good when they're able to take care of their families, and Pa can't, and it frustrates him. Marian was silent as she mulled over Lillian's words. "When did you become so wise?" she finally said, a small smile on her lips. Lillian chuckled, relieved that the crisis was over. She had garnered much from listening to the women who came into the store. They spoke candidly, as though she was not there. "Thank you, Lillian. I don't know what I would do without you," Marian said with feeling. "Mother's no good. She acts as though everything is fine, like Father's illness is a passing phase. Why, just yesterday, she and Cook were discussing the Phillips' misfortune." Lillian shook her head. The Phillips were another family from across town who had fallen into more or less the same fall from grace in society. Mr. Phillips' business partner had run off with all the business savings, and they had moved out of their beautiful big home. "I hate gossip," Lillian said. "Besides, Mother should know from our experience how wrong it is to discuss other people's misfortune." "I told her so, and she screamed at me to mind my own business," Marian said. "Forget about that," Lillian said, tired of discussing their mother. "I have something to cheer you up. Come, it's downstairs." In the living room, Lillian watched with joy as Marian exclaimed over the dress. It was not the kind of dress they could afford to buy. Miss Jane usually allowed her to pick out a dress from the last season which had not sold. This time, Lillian had asked if she could pick one for her sister instead, and her employer had agreed. It was a pale pink color with a full skirt and puffed short sleeves. "Oh, Lillian, it's so pretty. I haven't such a beautiful dress in my wardrobe. I shall treasure it and save it for special occasions." "Well, you deserve it," Lillian said, beaming at her younger sister. The front door clicked open, letting in a gush of wind along with their mother, whose countenance suggested she was not at all pleased, Lillian thought. "What's that?" she asked on seeing the dress. "It's a dress, Mother. Lillian got it for me from the shop," Marian said, stretching the dress so that their mother could see. Her mother screwed her eyes. "It's of a good quality." "Miss Jane sells dresses of very high quality," Lillian said, feeling a need to defend her employer. "It can't have been that good. In my day, I never heard of her store," their mother said before collapsing into a chair. "My legs hurt. Can someone ask Cook to make me a cup of tea? How's your father, Marian?" Lillian gave her sister a pointed stare. No point in telling their mother what had happened. "He's well, Mother. Will you go up and see him?" Marian said sweetly. Lillian observed her mother's pinched features. It had not escaped their notice how little their mother now went to his room. "Yes, when I've rested and had a cup of tea. Lillian, will you tell Cook to prepare me a cup of tea?" "Yes, Mother." Lillian got to her feet. She vowed silently to visit her pa as often as she could. Guilt gnawed at her. Only Marian was a regular in their father's life. Even their mother had given up, although she never said as much. She made fewer plans for the future. Like the rest of them, she seemed to tolerate life, living each day as it came. She found the cook asleep on the chair, her neck angled awkwardly. Lillian sighed. Her mother would simply have to agree to let Cook go. Paying her was seriously straining their resources. Besides, they could get their own breakfast and dinner now. She and Marian were able cooks, and cooks sometimes neglected to prepare meals. Rather than wake the sleeping woman, Lillian prepared the tea herself. Chapter 5. "Is Mrs. Spaulding's dress ready, Lillian?" Miss Jane asked, peeking into the back room. "Yes, Miss Jane," Lillian said and rubbed her eyes. "Please pack it up and bring it to the front." Lillian picked up a silk pale blue evening gown and carefully folded it and then wrapped it in tissue. Lillian froze when she entered the front room. He was there, in the shop. Her heart beat furiously, and for a second she didn't know whether to continue walking or flee. "Hello there, we meet again," he greeted, leaning his impossibly long body over the counter. Lillian arranged a smile on her face. "Now, if there are any more alterations needed, please tell your mother not to hesitate to return the gown," Miss Jane said smoothly as she took the parcel from Lillian and handed it to Ernest. "I will. Thank you," Ernest said, flashing Miss Jane a dazzling smile. He waved and nonchalantly left with Lillian gaping after him. "You two have met?" Miss Jane asked. "Not quite. I dropped a parcel on the street and he picked it up. I don't even know who he is. Oh, Ernest Spaulding's quite the eligible bachelor and has been for a number of years. It seems there are no interesting ladies for him here in Providence, but perhaps he's found one, Miss Jane said with a twinkle in her eye. Lillian blushed furiously. He's from a very good and wealthy family, she added with a wink. Excuse me, Miss Jane, I have to finish working on the dress, Lillian said and fled. She could hear Miss Jane's laughter follow her. Lillian's hands trembled, and she had to wait for a few minutes before continuing with her sewing. Seeing him again so unexpectedly had stunned her. The tremor in her hands ebbed, but her pulse refused to slow. The day went by in a daze for Lillian. She thought of Ernest leaning on the counter, gazing at her. Hello there, we meet again. What did his words mean? Was he happy to see her? Questions popped into her mind, torturing her because she had no answers. Lillian felt as though her very senses had been carried by a whirlwind and she had no control over her thoughts. She wished she had a close friend in whom to confide. Marian was still too young for such matters. She would not understand the fuss. Walking home that evening, Lillian kept glancing over her shoulder, hoping he would materialize. When she turned into the pathway to her home, it was with a heavy heart that she had not seen him. He appeared the following week, when she had given up all hope of ever seeing him again. He sidled up to her as she walked home. Lillian gasped and then blushed furiously. It felt as though everyone could hear her heart inside her chest. I was hoping you'd let me walk you home, Ernest said, smiling down at her. Her legs turned to jelly. Lillian prayed that she would not buckle and fall. She would just collapse if she did anything embarrassing. That would be lovely, she murmured, her voice sounding like someone else's. So you work for Miss Jane? He said conversationally. Yes, she's lovely, Lillian said, and immediately wanted to bite down on her lips. Why did she keep saying lovely? She wanted to engage Ernest in intelligent, grown-up conversation, but her brain had gone blank. Luckily, he didn't seem to notice as he told her about himself. You're a lawyer? She asked. Yes, my father hopes that one day he and I will be partners in the family law firm. What about you? Lillian managed to ask. He shrugged. I don't like to think that far into the future. I'll think about it when the time comes. Lillian thought that Ernest was the most exciting person she had ever met. Imagine taking life that easy, not worrying about the future. Then it hit her. She and Marian had been the same before their father's accident. Misfortune had made them worriers. They reached her driveway too quickly. Would you like to come in and meet my sister and mother? Mother is coming home early today, Lillian said on a whim. To her delight, he nodded. I'd love to. She saw their house as it looked to a stranger's eyes, decrepit. When she looked into his eyes as she pushed the door open, however, she did not see disgust in his expression. He just looked as pleased as she felt. Mother, Marian, Lillian called out in a softer voice than she would normally have used. We're in the living room, Marian bellowed back. Lillian smiled at Ernest apologetically. Mother Marian, I'd like you to meet Ernest Spaulding, Lillian introduced, and watched as her mother and sister jumped to their feet. Why did you not inform us that you would be having company? Her mother admonished in a tone Lillian had not heard in ages. Don't blame her, Mrs. Kincaid. I, in fact, insisted on meeting you, Ernest said smoothly. I see where Lillian gets her beauty. Lillian held her breath. Her mother despised forward people. To her surprise, her mother straightened her shoulders and smiled at him. Thank you, Mr. Spaulding, she said. Good looks run in our family. Marian rolled her eyes. Lillian saw it and glared at her. Correct me if I'm wrong, but are you from the Spaulding family, the family of lawyers? Ernest saluted and Marian giggled. That's me, ma'am. Why, you must give my regards to your parents, Lillian's mother said. Thank you. They will be delighted, Ernest answered. And now I must beg my leave. No, you must stay and dine with us, her mother invited. Lillian and Marian exchanged a look. They were probably having beef sandwiches for supper. Did their mother expect to serve a guest sandwiches for dinner? Another time, Mrs. Kincaid. It was an honor meeting you both, Ernest said and took her mother's hands into his. Lillian felt as though she was watching a play. Her mother's eyes sparkled, and the years seemed to fall from her face in a matter of minutes. He left with a lingering look in Lillian's direction. When the front door shut, her mother turned to her and took her hands. "Oh, Lillian, what a wonderful girl you are." Chapter 6. "Your father and I came here often," Lillian's mother gushed. "We always got the best table." "I hope that I did not disappoint," Ernest said, smiling to show that he had not taken offense. Lillian's mother blushed furiously. "Oh, Lord, no, this is just perfect. I was just thinking of the good old days before my husband's accident," she said, and her eyes filled with tears. Lillian impassively watched her mother's performance. It had been years since the thought of their pa had caused her mother to tear up. It was all for Ernest's benefit. "You must have been very popular," Ernest said as their mother wiped her tears and regaled Ernest with tales of how she had been the most popular girl at social dances. Lillian wanted to weep. Throughout dinner, she and Marian were quiet. 2 hours later, Lillian felt as though her tummy would explode. She had eaten too much to feel the discomfort she felt at being in such a posh establishment. Every table was lit with candles that made everyone's skin appear soft and glowing. She felt like an imposter, seated next to Ernest, as if she did not belong. Despite her mother's constant chatter, Lillian could tell that she felt out of her element. It had been years since she had been out to eat in a restaurant. While they waited for the check, Ernest reached into his pocket and took out a small white envelope, which he handed to Lillian's mother. "This is from my parents. They are hosting a dinner for a big man in the mining industry. I forget his name. Excuse me," Ernest said. "Anyway, they wanted to have you ladies attend." Lillian's mother clapped her hands, and her eyes glistened with tears. "That's just wonderful. We can't wait, can we, girls?" she said, her voice breaking with emotion. "Yes," Marian said in a dry tone. "We can't." "Please excuse me for a moment," Ernest said, and pushed back his chair. When he left, her mother leaned forward and spoke urgently. "I can't believe that after all these years we finally get an invitation to such a dinner party," she whispered. "I can't tell you how happy I am." "We can see that, Mother," Marian said. "Shut up," their mother snapped, her eyes blazing. "Don't spoil this for Lillian and me. You're just moody because it's not you who has Ernest's eye." "What?" Marian blustered so that people at the other tables turned to them. Lillian's mother smiled brightly at the staring people, and then turned back to Marian. "You shall behave yourself in here. This is our very last opportunity to be back in society, and I shall not have you ruin it." "Is everything all right?" They had not heard Ernest return to the table. "Oh, everything's fine. We like to discuss everything in our family, and sometimes the discussions get a little heated," her mother explained. "Ah, we do that too in my family. We have much in common then," Ernest said. Lillian saw him with 3 small white boxes. "I have something for you beautiful ladies," he said, and handed each of them a white box. Their mother was the first to open hers. Her hands immediately flew to her mouth when she saw the contents of the box. Lillian leaned in and caught sight of a sparkling white brooch boasting a tiny rose at the top. "This is so beautiful, but I really cannot accept it. It's too expensive," she protested. "I insist," Ernest said, beaming. "Now open yours, Lillian, and you too, Marian." Marian's contained a silver bracelet. "Thank you, most kindly, but I cannot accept it. Please take it," she said and handed the box back. "Don't be foolish, Marian," their mother said in a sweet voice, but Lillian did not miss the underlying threat. "Prosody, Spaulding has been very generous, and I would not wish his generosity insulted," she said primly. "Very well, thank you," Marian said, taking the box back without much enthusiasm. Lillian opened hers with trembling fingers to discover a golden sapphire and diamond necklace. Lillian gasped. She had never seen anything so beautiful. "This is mine?" she whispered. "Yes, and it doesn't come close to your beauty," Ernest said. Lillian was about to decline the extravagant gift, but she could feel her mother's eyes burning her forehead. "Thank you so very much," she said. After Ernest had seen them home, Lillian's mother insisted they sit in the living room for a few minutes. Lillian just wanted to go to bed. While the evening had gone splendidly, she preferred to be alone with Ernest. It was then that she saw the side of him she liked best. He was simple, and he seemed to enjoy their conversations as much as she did. When her mother was present, Lillian felt as though Ernest was putting on an act, and it made her very uncomfortable. "Do you know how much our combined jewelry is worth?" Mother said, sitting at the edge of the seat. "Does it matter, Mother?" Marian challenged. "In my opinion, what matters is whether Lillian is happy." "No one asked for your opinion, Marian, and I would be pleased if you kept it to yourself. Now, Lillian, when do you think he'll propose?" Lillian's mouth fell open. "Mother, we have barely known each other for 2 months. I can tell he will, you mark my words. Now all those people who laughed at us after your father's accident will eat their words. This is just the beginning, I tell you." Lillian involuntarily shuddered. Chapter 7. "Now I would like to order each dress in Miss Kincaid's size," Ernest ordered in the tone Lillian had come to recognize when he was speaking to working people. "I don't think so," Lillian swiftly said. She had no intention of accepting Ernest's gift of 5 gowns. It was just too much. Miss Jane looked from Ernest to Lillian helplessly. "Perhaps 2 would be an easier gift for Lillian to accept," Miss Jane suggested. "I said 5 of those. Now you can either serve me or I can go to another establishment," Ernest said, his voice hard. Miss Jane's lips tightened. "Very well," she said, and proceeded to write up an invoice. Lillian felt as though she had become invisible. It was not the first time that this had happened. Ernest had no regard for her thoughts. He brushed her off and proceeded to do as he pleased, irrespective of her feelings. Sometimes she thought he behaved like a spoilt child, and yet she knew that he was all of 29 years of age. She watched him hand over the money, feeling removed. "Miss Kincaid will not be working here for much longer," Ernest said as he took his receipt. "What?" Lillian quipped in a shaky, disbelieving voice. "I think that would be Lillian's decision to make," Miss Jane said. "Now, if you'll excuse me," she excused herself. "This is no place for the future wife of Earnest Spaulding to work," he said. Another irritation was Ernest's habit of referring to himself in the third person, which she failed to understand. It was usually only when he had a point to make. "Look, Ernest, I appreciate all you're doing for me and my family, but as Miss Jane said, I'll choose when and if I am to quit working," Lillian said, her voice taking on an edge. He softened his stance and smiled at her. "Don't look so upset. It was a suggestion made out of caring. She works you too hard and she takes advantage of you. How much are you paid? I will double that and have you stay at home." Lillian was too angry to reply. Fortunately, Ernest had to return to work, but he hadn't given up. "We shall continue this discussion tomorrow," he said, and as he left, adding over his shoulder, "I always get my way, Lillian." The incident and several others that came to Lillian's mind nagged her all afternoon. Miss Jane was barely speaking to her. She suddenly felt tired of Ernest and everything he represented. She had liked her life before he came into it. Now he seemed to control everything. While walking home, a shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders to ward off the evening chill, the solution came to Lillian. It was so simple. She was not bound to Ernest. They were not married, and she had a choice as to whether to continue their relationship. The more she thought about his visit to the shop, the more her anger escalated. By the time she reached home, it felt like a volcano about to erupt. She found her mother in her chambers with Marian. Her sister looked bored as their mother displayed the jewelry she had received from Ernest. "There you are. How was your day in that dreary little shop?" she asked gaily. Lillian clenched her teeth. "It is not dreary." Her mother waved her away. "Working's not for the likes of us. Why, I was just telling Marian that I intend to give my notice." "Why, for goodness sakes," Lillian cried out. "Your pay has increased considerably, Mother, and we need it for the house and Pa's medication." Her mother twirled about. "Ernest came by the surgery, and we had a little chat. He encouraged me to resign, though not in so many words." Lillian's eyes almost bulged from her eyes. "How dare he? Is that why he asked me to leave the store?" "Calm down, Lillian. Can you not see what a wonderful man he is?" "I told you Lillian wouldn't like it," Marian said smugly, "and neither do I, for that matter." "Shut up, Marian," their mother snapped. Lillian could not stand still. She paced the room, feeling as though the blood coursing her veins was steaming hot. "Mother, listen to me," she said, pronouncing each word carefully. "I've given this a lot of thought. I don't want to be with Ernest anymore. I don't like his bossy ways and... Are you mad? Have you completely lost your mind? Her mother screeched and then grabbed Lillian's shoulders and proceeded to shake her. I know what I'm doing, Mother. No, you don't. Bossy? What man is not bossy? You can't leave Ernest, and that's the end of this conversation. Lillian gently removed her mother's hands from her shoulders and said in a gentle voice, It's not your decision to make, Mother. To Lillian's consternation, her mother slumped on the bed and broke into noisy sobs. You can't do this to us, Lillian. Please, she cried. She pulled Lillian to the bed and gripped her hands. Don't be selfish. Think of us. Don't you see how much our lives have changed, and all because of Ernest? He's a good man, Lillian. Please, I beg you. Lillian looked past her mother to Marion. Marion shook her head and looked down. Lillian's glance went back to her mother. Her tear-filled eyes were on her, begging. Oh God, what would she do now? She truly did not want to be with Ernest any longer. She did not feel at all comfortable with him. Her mother tugged at her hand the way a child does when in need of attention. Her mood changed in an instant, and she looked up at Lillian, her eyes sparkling. Ernest has a surprise for you, Lillian. It'll make you forget all that nonsense and look on the brighter side. Lillian only remembered that statement that Saturday evening when Ernest took her to dinner at a posh establishment by the seaside. It was a beautiful night, with the sea a dark blue color. For the first time in weeks, she felt completely relaxed. I'm very lucky to have you, Lillian. A lady any man would be proud to call his wife, Ernest said, leaning forward in his chair to look into her eyes. Lillian blushed and murmured her thanks. When she looked up, it was to find Ernest kneeling by her side. Her eyes flew to the other patrons. They were all silently watching her and Ernest. A feeling of dread formed in her stomach. Lillian looked down at Ernest. He held out a small box. Lillian Kincaid, will you marry me? Her first instinct was to give him a firm no, but she realized that everyone in the establishment was waiting for her positive response. She smiled at Ernest weakly. Her whole being was crying out with indignation. Why did he have to propose to her so publicly? Lillian was a private person, and if Ernest knew her well enough, he should have known that. Had they been alone, she would have gently explained to him that she was not ready for such a commitment. Now she felt cornered, like an insect caught in a spider's web. Yes, Lillian finally said. He grinned widely, slid the ring onto her finger, and then stood up. The room was filled with calls of congratulations and cheering. Lillian wanted the ground to swallow her. A ballad, please, Ernest requested from the man who had been playing soft music on a piano in a corner. A slow dance to celebrate our engagement. A cheer went up again, and Lillian allowed herself to be led to the small dance floor. She felt stiff as she followed Ernest's feet, as if she was in a small boat caught in a storm. He would change now that they were engaged, Lillian told herself. She focused on the Ernest she liked, the Ernest who laughed and told amusing tales. Yet, the bits of him that she did not like, Lillian pushed to the back of her mind. When he returned her home, Ernest entered the house with her. It was late, but to Lillian's surprise, her mother was waiting in the living room. Oh, Lillian, isn't that beautiful? She exclaimed on seeing the impressive ring on Lillian's finger. For the first time, Lillian looked at her engagement ring. She was not well versed in matters of jewelry, but going by its size and her mother's reaction, it was probably an expensive ring. You're a good girl, Lillian, her mother told her that night as they parted ways in the hallway. Chapter 8. I missed you at the Donald's party. Oh yes, I felt so bad, but we were. Lillian listened to the voices. A smile plastered on her face until her jaws ached from the strain of appearing to enjoy herself. Lillian glanced at the clock on the mantel. 10:30. She stifled a yawn. You will have to get used to this sort of thing when you and Ernest are married. Lillian flinched. It was embarrassing to have her discomfort read so easily. I'm fine, Elizabeth, Lillian answered. Ernest's younger sister flopped down on the chair next to Lillian. She felt her body tense. You two are so different, she continued, smiling at Lillian. You're from such a humble background, while Ernest, well, she gestured around at the opulence that surrounded them. Controlling her anger at the implication of the words, Lillian turned to see the look of triumph on Elizabeth's face, which caused her to get up. "If you'll excuse me, I must find Ernest. Some of us do work for a living," she excused herself. Lillian was pleased to see the flash of anger on Elizabeth's face, and before she could say a word, Lillian had glided out and headed to the drawing room. The door was slightly ajar, and she walked in. Immediately she entered, Lillian knew she had made a mistake. All the men in the room stopped speaking and turned to look at her. She had made a dreadful faux pas, Lillian knew without being told. Ernest came forward and without a word propelled her from the room. His grip on her arm was harder than necessary, and she tried to shake his hand off, but it wouldn't budge. He pulled her into a storage room down the hallway and then shut the door. "What is it?" he asked, his anger clear. "I'm working tomorrow. I need to get home to sleep," Lillian explained in a shaky voice. Her right hand flew to her mouth, and she unconsciously nibbled her nail. She had returned to her unbecoming habit. "We were discussing a very important business matter, and you interrupted, all because you want to go home," he snarled, his lips curled downwards, a sign that she had come to recognize. "Please, Ernest," Lillian pleaded. "I had no way of knowing." She did not see the blow coming. His fist hit her square on the cheek, and within seconds she was on the floor. She remained down, holding her cheek in disbelief. He had hit her. She braced herself for more blows, but Ernest placed his hands under her arms and lifted her up. He wiped sweat from his forehead and looked away. "Look what you made me do," he whispered. "God, please forgive me, Lillian. I don't know what came over me. Come, my love, I'll take you home immediately." Numb with shock, Lillian allowed herself to be propelled from the room and the house. She stood stiffly and waited for the carriage to arrive. "Please say you forgive me," Ernest pleaded in the carriage. "I can't live without you." Only when the carriage stopped in front of her house did Lillian move. She jumped out without a word of goodbye and fled into the house. As soon as the door shut, she burst into tears. Footsteps hurried towards her. She looked up through her tears and saw Marian and her mother. "Lillian, what is the matter?" her mother asked. Lillian could not speak. It was Marian who removed her hand from her cheek. She gasped. "What happened, Lillian?" Marian asked. "It's Ernest. He hit me," Lillian said amid gasps. "The swine! How dare he?" Marian fumed. Lillian waited for her mother's reaction. She felt her come closer and touch her cheek. "What did you do to anger him so?" "Ernest is such a gentle man," she said. Lillian looked at her mother in disbelief, as did Marian. "Did you hear what she said, Mother? The man hit her." "I was not speaking to you. This is a matter for adults to handle. Go on upstairs to your room. Come, Lillian, let's go into the drawing room and we'll sort this matter out. Why, tomorrow you'll be as good as new." Lillian shrugged her mother's slender hand away. "What is wrong with you, Mother? Did you not hear what I said? The man hit me in my face and I fell to the floor." "Don't exaggerate, Lillian. It's an unbecoming habit, so he hit you. If I know you, you must have provoked him. Why? The right makeup will cover it up and no one will tell. Now, go on to bed and I'll fix you up in the morning." "Makeup, Mother?" Lillian whispered. "Yes, rouge on the cheeks is all the rage. Those hags who come to the store will think you the most fashionable girl in all of Providence." Lillian forced her legs to carry her up the stairs. Her mind was working fast. It was time for her to go. She thought about the advertisement she had torn from the Matrimonial Times. That was her way out of Providence. She could not break it off with Ernest and remain here. She had to go. The doubts she had harbored over the past few weeks had been erased. Marrying Ernest would be the worst mistake she would make in her life. Outside her door, Marian materialized to embrace her and held her tight. "I'll be all right," Lillian whispered to her sister. "Promise, Lillian," Marian said, her voice cracking with emotion. "I promise I will. I have a plan. Don't worry," Lillian said, her resolve hardening. She lay awake for a long time, mentally formulating the letter she intended to write first thing in the morning. Chapter 9. Lillian peered at the picture of David Laird and tried to read behind his heartwarming smile. She did this each morning before she went to work, and in the evenings when Ernest did not require her company. On the bed were 3 letters. each wrinkled from being handled too many times. Lillian unfolded the first letter she had received from him after responding to his advert. Dear Miss Kincaid, I was very pleased to receive your letter, and I must say that yours captured my interest. As I said in my advertisement in the Matrimonial Times, I live on a ranch in Idaho Springs where I raise chickens and pigs. I come from a family of hard workers in Illinois, although I have scanty childhood recollections. I arrived in Idaho Springs with my father, the Lord rest his soul, when I was a lad of 15, soon after we lost my mother. Through hard work and the Lord's blessings, my father was able to acquire the piece of land on which I now farm, which we developed together. It is my source of joy, and we produce all the pork and poultry for Idaho Springs. I was happy to learn that you are well versed in ranching. I would dread a city girl as a bride, because life would not be easy for any of us in that situation. Please tell me more about yourself in your next letter. I eagerly await your news. Sincerely, David Laird. Lillian folded the letter and glanced at his photo once again. He had dimpled cheeks and blonde hair which was neatly combed and parted to the side. Since posting her letter 3 weeks before, Lillian had been a bundle of nerves. She had told him that she was ready to make the journey to Montana to be his wife. She had looked up the Montana territory on a map, and the sheer distance from Rhode Island made her knees weak. With a sigh, Lillian folded the letters and placed them under her pillow with the photo. Taking her coat from the wardrobe, Lillian glanced outside at the blanket of snow covering the ground. Despite the chill, Lillian enjoyed her walk to work. It cleared her mind and gave her time to think. She slipped on her coat, took her small handbag, and softly closed the door. The house was quiet, as her mother had resigned from her position at the surgery. Her father and Marion slept late into the mornings. Lillian gently opened the front door and slipped out. A chuckle escaped Lillian's lips whenever her boots sunk into the snow. A memory came then of her and Marion trying to get themselves buried under the snow. Their mother had been livid when she found them, but their father had laughed with amusement when his wife related the incident to him when he got home. Sadness enveloped her heart when she thought how they had all changed since the accident. Lillian's mother had become a different woman entirely. Her pa had given up all endeavors to get his legs working again. And Marion, Lillian's heart swelled with pain. Her younger sister looked older than her years. The years of taking care of their pa had taken a toll. The spirited girl Lillian had known was slowly coming a shell of herself. Then there was Ernest. He wanted to set a date for their marriage, and while months ago she had been sure that she did not want to marry him, Lillian wasn't so sure now. He had changed over the last month or so. He hadn't hit or scolded her once, and he seemed to be the man she had been drawn to when they first met. Perhaps he had changed for the better. Ernest had hinted at more permanent nursing care for her pa when they got married. That would leave Marion free to be the young woman she was. She thought of David Laird. What did she really know about him? He could also be a violent man, perhaps. It would be worse, being so far away from her family. Perhaps she was better off marrying Ernest after all. These thoughts plagued Lillian's mind all day as she attended to their customers. Prosody C. Miss Jane had promoted Lillian, and she now spent most of her day in the front room seeing to the clients. A new girl had been employed in her place. At 4:45, Lillian went to the back room. "Amber, it's almost time to close up," Lillian told the red-haired girl. The lighting was much better in the back room nowadays. "Oh, let me just finish this dress. Don't worry, I'll close up," Amber said without looking up, her red curls covering most of her face. Lillian smiled at her fondly. The girl loved sewing. She was made for the job. "All right then, I'll see you tomorrow," Lillian said. She cleared the counter and left the store minutes before 5. Experience had taught her to always be waiting on the street at exactly 5 o'clock. A minute later meant that she would incur Ernest's wrath. She stood for a couple of minutes before seeing the carriage making its way down the snow-covered road. Lillian pushed the door open and smiled at Ernest. He scowled at her. "You must stop this nonsense of working. I've been more than patient with you," he said. "Good evening to you too," Lillian teased, trying to lure him out of his bad humor. He screwed his face. Her heart missed a beat. She had not seen that look in a long while, but she knew it well. "Are you being insolent?" he hissed. Before she could reply, his large hand reached for her and grabbed a handful of her hair. He brought her face to his, stared into her eyes, and then, without warning, punched her in the stomach with his free hand. Lillian yelped in pain. "Is everything all right back there?" the coachman called. "Mind your own business if you know what's good for you," Ernest yelled back. He turned to Lillian and spoke into her ear. "This is your last day there. You hear me?" A streak of rebellion filled her being. Who was he to tell her what to do? "I'm not leaving Miss Jane's store until I'm ready to," Lillian said defiantly. The moment the words left her mouth, she knew she had made a big mistake. His eyes flashed with rage. When he grabbed her, he yanked her off the seat and onto the floor of the carriage. Lillian covered her face and crouched into a ball to deflect the worst of the blows. Chapter 10. A black woolen shawl covered Lillian's head, leaving only her eyes exposed. She clutched the envelope and hurried back home. She had sent Marian to the store 2 days ago with a message to Miss Jane that she wasn't well and wouldn't be coming to work. Despite her insistence that she would quit working when she was ready, a paralyzing fear had come over her. After the beating in the carriage, Ernest had whispered before solicitously helping her into the house, "Next time you'll not be walking." Whenever she thought of his words, said in a friendly but chilly tone, a tremor of fear went through her. The underlying threat was that he would paralyze her, just like her pa. The thought of never walking again filled her with such fear that she had now become as a hunted animal. Lillian could not remain still. She spent most of the last 2 days at the front window, dreading Ernest's arrival, and dashing to the post office to check for David's letter. It had arrived. Her hands trembled, and it was not from the cold. "Please let the ticket be there." Lillian said this over and over again. She returned to the house at 9 to find her mother in her dressing gown in the drawing room, holding a pen and a notepad. "What color do you think we should paint this room?" "Cream is what I had in mind," she said. "I didn't know you were redecorating," Lillian said, leaning on the doorframe. Her mother turned to her, her eyes glistening. "Didn't Ernest tell you? It's his gift to us for your marriage. Isn't he a dear boy?" "Mother," Lillian started to say and then abruptly stopped. Without saying another word, she whirled about and fled up the stairs to her room. Breathing hard, she closed the door and leaned against it. Her body shook violently. She felt as though the walls were closing in around her and she couldn't breathe. "Calm down," Lillian told herself. She moved to her bed, sat down, and ripped the letter open. The contents fluttered onto her lap when she removed the letter: a train ticket and instructions on connecting to a stagecoach. Lillian broke down into tears. The relief was so great it rendered her body weak. When she got her emotions under control, Lillian unfolded the letter. "Dear Lillian, may I call you by your given name? It feels to me as if I know you so well already, and I hope you don't think me too forward in addressing you informally. I can't tell you how your letter of acceptance warmed my heart. I cannot wait for your arrival. Please dress warmly for the journey. It will be taxing, but I assure you that it will be well worth it. Montana is beautiful, although the winters tend to be harsh. The view of the Rocky Mountains covered in snow is a sight to behold and well worth any hardship winters may bring. I am a simple man, Lillian, with simple needs. All I've prayed for and want is an honest and kind-hearted woman who thrives on a simple but satisfying life. I believe you are that woman, and I know we'll be happy together. I wish you a safe passage and will be there to welcome you when you arrive. Sincerely, David Laird. She had lied. Lillian closed her eyes. He sounded like such a good man, and she had told him nothing but lies about herself. But what option had she had? Had she told him the truth about herself, Lillian knew he would not want her as his mail-order bride. Lillian only knew that eggs were produced by chickens and milk by cows, and that was as far as her farming knowledge extended. The stagecoach would be leaving in 3 days. Despite her worries, Lillian felt a tremor of excitement. It would be a new start for her. Her thoughts then went to Marian, and her excitement faded. Telling her sister that she was leaving would be the most difficult part. prosody, Lillian reached under her mattress and removed an envelope bulging with the cash she had saved over the years she had worked. Her family would be comfortable for a while. Just then, a knock came on her door, followed by Marian's voice. Before Lillian could answer, the door was flung open. Marian's eyes went to the money and the letter on the bed, and then to Lillian. "What's all that?" Lillian swallowed hard and held her sister's gaze. "I'm leaving, Marian," she said in a shaky voice. "I have to. I can't stay here anymore. I must leave for all our sakes." Before the last word was out, tears had filled Marian's eyes. Chapter 11. At 32 years of age, he was finally going to marry. It had not been from lack of trying. Single and suitable women were rare in Idaho Springs. David Laird also had very definite ideas about the woman he wanted to marry, a woman as gentle and honest as his mother had been. Despite it being more than 15 years since he had lost his mother, memories of her were sharp. Sometimes he could still hear her gentle voice. Out of 10 responses to his advert, Lillian Kincaid's letter had struck him as the most honest. She had confided in him about her father's illness, and his heart had gone out to her. That she was hardworking was not in doubt. She had worked to make ends meet for her family, and that told him all he needed to know about her character. That was the kind of woman he wanted for a wife. Murmurs went through the crowd waiting for the stagecoach. It was always an event when the stagecoaches came into town. David spotted Pastor Dobbs and his wife, Sue Dobbs, in the crowd. The pastor and he met eyes and waved to each other. Pastor Dobbs winked at him, and David chuckled. He had told him earlier in the week that Lillian Kincaid was due to arrive, and that they would be wanting to wed. The pastor had been very enthusiastic, which had confirmed David's decision as being the right one. The stagecoach was scheduled to arrive at 9:30, but by 10 it had not yet arrived. Finally, the delayed coach arrived an hour and a half late. She was here. His bride had arrived. David could not keep still. He was fortunate to tower over the crowd. He was sure he would recognize Lillian Kincaid when she appeared on the platform. Her photograph had not been very clear, but her oval-shaped face and long black hair showed very well. He watched eagle-eyed as the passengers disembarked, each getting swallowed by the crowd. He saw her then, and his knees turned to water. Lillian Kincaid. She was just as he had envisioned her. She looked this way and that, and then her eyes settled on him. Their recognition was instant. She smiled, revealing perfect, small teeth, and his legs carried him to her of their own accord. "Lillian?" David said. "Yes," she said in a soft voice. For a second, David's mind cleared. She was more beautiful than he could have imagined. He felt as if he was drowning in her blue eyes. He shook himself and smiled. "What a pleasure to finally meet you," David said. "Welcome to Idaho Springs." "Thank you," she said in that soft voice that one could listen to all day without tiring of it. "The mountains are so big and the countryside is lovely." "That it is," David said, feeling uncharacteristically nervous. "Let's get your luggage. I imagine you're eager for a warm bath and something to eat." "I am a little hungry," she said with a wry grin. The sandwiches served on the stage stop were not very satisfying. "I forgot to warn you about that." They both laughed. David realized he was staring only when she looked around her in discomfort. She was so tiny, reaching his shoulder. He fought an urge to pull her to him and wrap her in his arms. It was difficult to imagine that such a petite young woman had provided for her family. He carried Lillian's trunk effortlessly through the crowd to his buggy. "At your service, ma'am," David said, bowing low. Lillian giggled and made her way into the buggy. David felt infused with joy as he rounded the handsome cab to climb into the driving seat. "The farm is less than 10 miles from here. It shouldn't take too long. The snow had been cleared from the road, so it will be a smooth ride." "That's all right. I'll enjoy looking at the scenery," she said. He was aware of Lillian sitting beside him. Her presence was peaceful, and he could not believe that his prayers had been answered. David wanted to show her everything. He wanted her to see the farmhouse, the chickens, the pigs, and the patch behind the house where a healthy garden was dotted with all manner of vegetables. His wife would lack for nothing, he thought to himself. "We're here." David said as he guided the horse that drew the buggy from the main road to the dirt road that led to the farm. He looked at the surroundings as a stranger might. The grass that bordered the road was well kept, thanks to his neighbor's herd of cows, and as they came around the corner, the house came into view, and Lillian sighed. "This is so charming. It feels like home already," she said, to his complete joy. "Before I show you to the house, I'll give you a quick tour of the farm," he invited. "I'm looking forward to that," she said. Holding her hand, he took her around the house to the back. "So many structures," she murmured. David laughed happily. He led her to the chicken structure, where she peered in and exclaimed, "I've never seen so many chickens. How many are there?" 1,000, by my records, but the figure rises and falls depending on how many we take to the market each week. After he showed her the pigs, she turned to him. "You do all this by yourself?" "No, I have a lad who comes each morning to help. Name's Isaac." She wasn't as enthusiastic as he had hoped, but David shrugged it off as exhaustion after the journey. Chapter 12. David was a good man, Lillian told herself repeatedly while she dressed for her marriage ceremony. Hadn't the pastor, a nice talkative man, told her so himself? The pastor's wife, a cheerful, plump woman who had introduced herself as Sue Dobbs, had told her how blessed she was to have David as her husband. Yet, despite all these assurances, Lillian was cold with fear. Ernest, too, had been wonderful in the beginning. How did one tell what kind of person they were marrying? David spoke a great deal about his belief that the Lord had brought them together. As much as Lillian longed for that same faith, a cold fear in her heart prevented her from being quite as sure as David. She looked down at her cream, flowing dress without much excitement. It had been 3 days since she arrived, and everything here seemed so different. She felt useless being able to only clean house and cook. She had tried once to help David feed the chickens, but she feared them, which rendered her less than helpful. All should have been well. After all, she had escaped Ernest, but she had the guilt of her selfishness as a burden. She had only thought of herself. How were they faring? How long would the money she had left hold out? And then there was Marion. Without shame, Lillian had left her little sister to shoulder their mother's wrath. She looked about her without much joy. The house was charming and warm, built of fine timber, with 3 large bedrooms, a living room and kitchen. The only downside was that the toilet was outside, but David had told her he had plans to construct one next to the washroom. With a deep sigh, she wrapped a matching cream shawl around her shoulders and left the guest room. "You look just beautiful," David said when he saw her. Her worries dissipated somewhat when she looked at him. He wore a brown suit that brought out the color of his eyes, but it was his look of adoration that melted her heart. How had she landed herself such a handsome and good man, if only there was a guarantee that it would last? He helped her into the buggy, and soon they were on their way to the small church on the hill. "Happy?" David asked. Lillian nodded and plastered a smile on her face. She felt panicky as they approached the church. The ceremony proceeded as expected, and minutes later they accepted congratulations from Pastor Dobbs and Sue Dobbs, who had been the witnesses. "You chose a good man," Sue Dobbs told her again when they stood outside the church, waiting for the men to come out. "Thank you," Lillian murmured, fearing the pastor's wife could sense that she had become David's wife under false pretenses. After the ceremony, they returned home directly, although David had offered to buy a meal at the hotel. Lillian had pleaded exhaustion. She just wanted to get away from everybody, especially Sue Dobbs, who seemed to pay her too much attention. "We have a bake sale in 2 weeks and would be glad of any help we can get," she had said before they parted. "Come on, Sue," Pastor Dobbs had chided. "Let the bride enjoy her new home first." "I'm sure Lillian would be glad to help," David had said. Her signals had shot up. Was he trying to force her into something she might not want to do? That was what Ernest had want to do. "But I agree with Pastor Dobbs," David had quickly added, noting her unresponsiveness. "Lillian does need time to get used to her new life." That evening, as she prepared their dinner of lamb, potatoes, and vegetables, Lillian feared she might have lost her sense self somehow. She was unsure whether she might be misinterpreting the situation or whether her imagination was running away with her. Something blew on the nape of her neck. Startled, Lillian screamed and whirled about. Prosody. "Whoa, it's just me," David placated. "You frightened me," Lillian snapped, the tension of recent days venting. "I'm sorry, I was only playing," he said, his face stunned. "I would appreciate it if you'd let me know when you're in a room rather than sneaking up on me in future." Lillian could not believe those words had come out of her mouth. Tears gathered in her eyes, and she turned away so that he wouldn't see them. What was wrong with her? At one time she had been fun to be with? Poor David. He was stuck with a woman who did not even understand herself. He placed his hands on her shoulders and turned her around. "I'm really sorry, my darling. I never meant to alarm you. It won't happen again." His kindness undid her composure, and she broke into loud sobs. David held her, and she rested her head on his chest. When her sobbing abated, he held her at arm's length. "Please tell me what the matter is. I can tell something is not right." Lillian's instinct was to chew on her fingernails, but she resisted the urge. "I suppose I'm just worried about my family and how they're faring," she finally said, opting for a half-truth. "Are you worried about money?" he asked. Lillian nodded. "Well, at least I can help with that. The farm is doing well. I'd even set aside some money to add on to the acreage, so we don't have worries over money. How about we send them money every month? That way, you'll not worry." Tears sprung to her eyes again. She felt as though she was using David. "That's too much to ask of you," Lillian said. "You're my wife now, and your family is my responsibility too. Now that's agreed, so no more long faces," he said with a smile. "And please trust me with your worries in future, all right?" Lillian nodded. Chapter 13. David finished mucking out the pig stall, and rather than move on to the next, he decided to pop into the house and have a short visit with Lillian. It was 2 months since their marriage, and he still could not get enough of his wife. He still felt a jolt of joy whenever he saw her. She was so pretty and kind and hard-working. If only that guarded look would leave her face permanently. It was as if she expected him to harm her. It broke his heart when that shadow of fear crossed her face. Something was nagging at him. Lillian had not been well over the past week, and she only brushed him off when he asked. Voices in the kitchen stopped him in his tracks. David recognized Sue Dobbs' voice, and he smiled and turned back to the stall. He was pleased that she had come to visit. Lillian could do with a friend. He went on to muck out the last stall, the snort of the pigs filling the air. He was still busy when he heard footsteps, and he looked up with a smile, knowing it would be the pastor's wife. "Hello there," David said to her. She leaned in over the half wall of the stall. "Hello," she said. "I just popped in to say hello. I was in there with Lillian. She seems settled now. Thought I'd apologize for the last time and ask her if she wants to help with the potluck picnic." David laughed. "You don't give up easily, do you?" She grinned sheepishly. "Actually, that was just an excuse to see how she's faring." "Thanks, Sue. I reckon Lillian could use a friend as she knows nobody here." "How are you, David?" she asked. Her penetrating eyes focused on him. "Pretty well, I'd say, apart from what?" Sue Dobbs asked. He looked at her and decided he could trust her. He needed another person's perspective. "I don't know how to explain it. Everything's as it should be, yet Lillian seems fearful of me. I'd never hurt her, of course, but she behaves as if I might jump on her at any moment." Sue Dobbs nodded. "She is a bit jumpy, especially when you catch her unawares. Probably something to do with her past. Nothing that plenty of love can't fix. She'll relax once she realizes that she can trust you." "I hope so. It tears me apart when she acts like that," David admitted. "How is she? When I left this morning, she wasn't too well. She has been vomiting every time she eats." Sue Dobbs smiled, and her eyes twinkled. "Perhaps she's expecting," she said. David's stomach turned to water. "A baby? So soon?" he asked, and then immediately blushed. "How exciting. Is she all right? Will she need to see a doctor immediately?" "Calm down, David. She'll be fine. God created women to carry children. It comes naturally. Sure, she ought to see a doctor, but there's no rush." When she finally left, David headed straight to the house. Lillian was in the living room, knitting. She looked up at him and smiled shyly. Sue Dobbs had probably assured her too. "I have some good news, David," she said. "I'm expecting a child, our own child. Isn't that something?" For the first time, he saw love in her eyes, and he wanted to jump up and down. Instead, he sat down next to her. "That makes me so happy," he admitted, his voice loaded with feeling. "I love you so much." David almost fell from the chair when she looked him straight in the eye and said, "I love you too, David." Chapter 14. The midwife handed the newborn baby to Lillian, a boy with a mass of black hair, just like his mama's, and the biggest, brightest blue eyes she had ever seen. Lillian was immediately smitten. The midwife cleaned her up before heading to the door to beckon David to enter. He had beads of sweat on his brow. He leant over the bed and looked at the baby as though he was the loveliest thing he had ever laid eyes on. "Isn't he handsome?" Lillian asked. "There are no words to describe how I feel. Thank you, Lillian, my dear wife, for completing my joy." "What shall we call him?" Lillian asked. "Tell me what you think of Tobias. It means the goodness of the Lord," David suggested. It was perfect. "I love it. Tobias Laird." They spent the next 2 days marveling over their newborn son. By the third day, Lillian was well enough to attend to her chores around the house, with the baby in a cradle that could be moved from room to room. Peace had finally come to her heart. The past year had taught her that David's love was steadfast and not dependent on his moods. Slowly, her love had grown until she felt she could burst with the love she felt for him and their son. They fell into a routine. Lillian woke up first before dawn and saw to their breakfast. David came down next, carrying baby Tobias, the baby's blue eyes already looking around him. After breakfast, David went off to farm until midday. In a matter of months, Lillian had all but forgotten her woes back east. She and Marion communicated regularly, and she had instructed her to let their parents know that all was well and that she had married and was settled with a good husband. The Lairds had managed to purchase another 2 acres. David was fencing the area as he planned on expanding into beef farming. Lillian whistled as she carried baby Tobias in a sling in her arms into town. It was 10 in the morning, and she needed to buy supplies for the house. Lillian chuckled at the fib she had told herself. The shopping could wait, but she needed female company. Popping into town was just an excuse to meet with Ella May, a young woman who worked at the general shop. She had a small baby too, a little girl older by a year. The main street consisted of 3 blocks, housing several businesses. Lillian made for the general store and to her dismay found Ella May engrossed with customers. The town had grown considerably, as David had told her, and it was no longer possible to know everyone who lived there. She bought her sugar and flour, and after waving at Ella May, Lillian left the store. It was while she was walking along the boardwalk that she felt the hairs on the nape of her neck rise. She whipped around sharply and searched the sea of faces, mostly male. No one among them was paying her any particular attention. A feeling of dread that she could not shake off settled in her abdomen. Before coming off the main street, she turned around once more. A turn of the head caught her eye, and the person melted into the crowd before she could see him properly. Lillian chuckled softly to herself. "Your mother is becoming paranoid," she whispered to Tobias. Once home, the episode disappeared from her mind and she busied herself preparing sandwiches and tea for David's lunch. "Come, let's go take this to your pa," she said to a sleepy Tobias. She strolled along the pasture, enjoying the feel of the warm sun on her face. Her mind returned to the figure she had seen, and she felt an icy grip of fear in her heart. She did not want to think the unthinkable. It couldn't be him, could it? "There you are, my loves. Thought you had lost the way?" David said, walking to meet her. "Is he asleep?" "Yes, he fell asleep after our walk to town," Lillian said. Prosody rate %. "Here, let me take him," David said, and gently took the baby from her. He carried him to the oak tree and placed him in the shade. "There," he said, and then looked at her. "What is it?" He knew her so well, Lillian felt heaviness in her heart. They were so close, yet there was a part of her life she could never reveal to him. "Nothing at all. I'm well," she said without conviction. They had their lunch and then lay on their backs to look at the sky. Her heart was not in it, and she excused herself as soon as she could. David looked after her thoughtfully, but did not say a word. The baby woke up when she got in the house. "I'll be with you in a minute, my love," Lillian crooned to him. She bolted the front door before settling down to feed him, but looked up even before she heard the voice. "Hello, Lillian. It's been a long time." Lillian's jaw fell open, and her hold on the baby tightened as her body trembled violently. He was leaning on the door jamb to the kitchen, wearing a smile as though they had parted on good terms. "What are you doing here?" Lillian gasped. "How did you find me?" He chuckled. "Unlike you, your mother is a very loyal woman. She was appreciative of all that I did for your family, and she wanted to repay my kindness." Tears filled her eyes. Her own mother had betrayed her. "What do you want?" Lillian whispered. "Why, Lillian, how could you ask such an obvious question?" "I want to take you back home with me, of course. You were mine first, and you shall remain so for the rest of your life." "Ernest, please. I have a life here, a husband and a child." His face hardened. He took a few steps towards her and grabbed the baby in one fluid movement. Had Lillian not relinquished Tobias, she knew Ernest would not have stopped short of hurting him. She began to sob. "Please, I'll do anything. Don't hurt my baby." "I don't intend to hurt him if you follow my instructions. He's my safeguard, you see," he said, and then smiled down at the baby and then at Lillian. "Now, here's what you'll do. You will divorce that man and then marry me. In addition to that, I'll require $200 as payment for the time you have wasted. I reckon that's a fair deal. I'll be at the boarding house at the edge of town. Make a mistake of coming with anyone, and this is the last you'll see of the child." A red light went off in Lillian's brain. She jumped up and kicked at him. She would not allow him to take her Tobias from her. He held the baby with one arm and punched her square in the face. Before she could react, he rained vicious blows on her. The last she remembered was lying on the rug, clutching her abdomen. Lillian came to what seemed like hours later. Familiar faces hovered over her. "Where's Tobias?" she screamed. "Calm down, Mrs. Laird," Dr. Spencer soothed. She tried to sit up but was held down by David and Pastor Dobbs. "My baby, he took my Tobias," Lillian cried, trying to make them understand. "Tell us what happened in a calm manner," Pastor Dobbs said in a firm voice. Lillian forced herself to calm down and in a halting voice told them everything. She did not look at David as she told the tale. When she finally did, his expression was thunderous. "When I find this thug, he thundered. "Come on, David, that won't help matters," Pastor Dobbs said. "Here's what we'll do. We'll split up. I'll go to the sheriff's office, and you, David, can go to the station and check if any stagecoaches are bound to be leaving for the east." "How could you keep this from me?" he hissed at her before turning to leave. "You mentioned nothing of another man." "I'm sorry, David. Please forgive me," Lillian called out. He turned to her. Prosody rate. "I cannot forgive you for this. This is Tobias we're talking about. You put my child's life in jeopardy." "He won't harm him as long as we give him the money." Lillian omitted mention of Ernest's demand that she leave with him. They left Lillian pacing the house. She knew where David kept the money. She had already resigned herself to her fate. She would do as Ernest demanded. She had seen the look of pure hatred in her husband's eyes. He would never forgive her. But none of that mattered, Lillian decided as she went into their bedroom to collect the money. As long as her darling Tobias was safe and back home, she hurried out of the house, her head throbbing from the attack. She skirted around town to avoid meeting anyone she knew and found the boarding house fairly easily. "I'm looking for Earnest Spaulding," she told the receptionist without looking at her face. "I'm sorry, there's no one here by that name," the woman replied in a hoarse voice. Lillian panicked. "A man with a small baby? You mean him. He's in room 4 on the ground floor." Lillian rushed for the hallway, reached room 4, and pushed the door open without knocking. She could hear the sounds of a baby crying. "Here's your mama. Told you she'd be here," Ernest said, sitting on a chair by the window. Lillian rushed to the baby on the bed. "Not so fast," Ernest said and jumped to his feet. "Do you have my money?" "Yes, here it is," Lillian said, and shoved the notes in his hand. She took her baby and kissed his face over and over again. "My Tobias," she said, crying over him. "I give you 30 minutes to take him home. That will give me enough time to purchase a wagon for our journey." "All right," Lillian said in a defeated voice. She trudged out of the room, baby Tobias's cries echoing down the hallway. He was hungry, but there was no time to feed him. She hurried away, feeling removed from the situation as if she was just a spectator. Rather than going home, Lillian made a snap decision to head for the church, crossing her finger and praying fervently that Sue Dobbs would be there. Sue was leaning over the flower beds, pulling weeds. "Lillian, the baby? You have the baby," Sue Dobbs cried out when she saw her. "Come on in," she said, leading Lillian to the privacy of the church office. Lillian immediately set about feeding the baby, probably for the last time. "I can't face David, Sue. I want to leave the baby here with you. I'll tell you everything, but you must not ask questions. Simply believe me when I tell you it has to be this way." "It can't be that bad?" Sue said. Lillian glared at her. This was no time for platitudes. She told her about Ernest, including how she had run away from home to escape his abuse. Again, she omitted having to now leave Montana. "I shall be home later, but for now I need to sort out my own mess," Lillian said in a voice devoid of emotion. After Tobias was fed and dozing, Lillian stood and handed him to Sue Dobbs and left without another word. "Thought I'd have to come and get you," Ernest said when he saw her. He was waiting outside the boarding house, the wagon ready for the journey. Lillian looked about her for the last time and limply climbed onto the wagon. Chapter 15. The more he listened to Sue Dobbs, the more David realized the extent of the mistake he had made. He had not trusted his wife. He had accused her of lying to him, but her lies had been to protect herself. Now that Tobias was safe, his mind was focused on Lillian. He was horrified that the woman he loved was with a man that would hurt her. "She said she's a shell without you. She loves you so much, David," Sue said. He covered his face with his hands. What had he done? He had been so judgmental. How could have been so blind? "We all make mistakes, David, and knowing Lillian, she never meant to harm you or the baby," Pastor Dobbs said. "If our Lord forgives all our sins, who are we not to? What do we do now?" "Did she say where she went?" David asked, his voice ravaged by pain. Sue Dobbs shook her head, only that she had to sort out her mess. "And the man, there are only two ways of leaving here, by horse or by wagon," Pastor Dobbs said. David shot to his feet. "I'll ask around. He might have purchased a wagon." "I'll come with you," Pastor Dobbs said. "I can't lose her," David thought as he raced the buggy towards the town. "Everything is in the Lord's control, David. All will be well," Pastor Dobbs said, holding on to the side of the speeding buggy. He heard the words, but they didn't register. David had a feeling of dread in his heart. All was not well. He could feel it in his bones. Lillian needed him. He would never forgive himself if anything happened to her. Pastor Dobbs was the first to jump down, and he ran into the store. By the time David tethered the horses and entered the store, the pastor was already questioning the proprietor, a middle-aged, gray-haired man. "He seemed in a mighty hurry," the man said, "and I must say, quite rude. That's why I remember him so well." "Did he say where he was headed?" Pastor Dobbs asked, his calm voice hiding the anxiety they both felt. "Yes," said he needed a sturdy covered wagon as he was going to Denver. "Thank you very much for your help," Pastor Dobbs said, and he and David hurried out. They took the main road that headed towards Denver. All the while, David silently prayed, begging for forgiveness. If he got his Lillian back, he would spend the rest of his life making it up to her, showing her his love and trust. "I see something ahead," Pastor Dobbs said. David focused his eyes ahead, and he saw it. His chest gave a heave. Everyone from the area knew to be careful driving by Copper's Creek. The road was bordered on both sides by deep valleys with only bushes and trees along the narrow road as barriers. The bushes to the left were disturbed and completely flattened. David stopped the buggy and they both jumped out. He peered down the valley from the edge, his heart thumping hard in his chest. His eyes caught a body hanging from a ledge jutting out of the rocks. A scream remained lodged in his throat. The limbs were twisted and so was the upper body. On looking closer, David saw that it was a man. Then he heard the whimpers. "Lillian?" David yelled. The moans were not coming from the valley. He retraced his steps and made for a cluster of trees further on. The moan came again, and this time he could pinpoint its location. Pastor Dobbs was right behind him when he found her. "Oh, Lillian," David cried. "My Lillian." She was curled into a ball and her hair was matted to her head, streaked with blood. "David, oh, David," Lillian cried out. "I'm so sorry, my love. Please forgive me. I was a fool." David took her into his arms. She cringed as he lifted her. "We need to get her to Dr. Spencer," Pastor Dobbs said. In a moment, they were rushing back to town. Epilogue. The two sisters sat on the porch, shelling peas. Tobias was helping too, though his task was to toss the peas into the air and try to catch them. He giggled every time he caught one. "I can never get enough of this view," Marion commented. "I know what you mean. It's just beautiful," Lillian said and stood to stretch her muscles. This time she was carrying very heavily, and David constantly teased that she was carrying twins. Dr. Spencer had not detected another child, but had warned that twins sometimes hid behind one another and only made their presence known during the birth. She would be glad to welcome twins. Now that Marion was living with her, taking care of 3 babies would not be a problem. Her sister was a godsend, Lillian thought, eyeing her sister fondly. "Why are you staring at me?" Marion asked. "Just thinking how blessed we are to have you with us," she replied, taking her seat again carefully. "I'm the lucky one. Thank you so much for inviting me here. With Papa gone, there was nothing for me back home. And Mama?" Their mother had married a rich widower, and according to Marion, she was very happy. Happier than she had been in years, and that made Lillian glad. Then something struck Lillian. "You're 18 years old now, Marion. Goodness, how time flies by." "It does. I'm practically an adult now," Marion said with a grin. "Do you ever think of marriage? I could introduce you to a few fine young men." Marion visibly shuddered. "No, thank you. Maybe sometime in the future. Right now, I'm just enjoying having a family. I can't get enough of Tobias. He's such a cheerful boy." "He is, isn't he?" Lillian affirmed. Marion's features hardened. What kind of a mother is she? All she cares about is her place in society and cavorting with those rich, idle women, and having a rich man in her life. Lillian knew that Marion was talking about their mother. Her sister always spoke with so much bitterness, but then she had stayed at home the longest. She's used to being taken care of, Marion. It's a good thing she found someone who can do that for her. Mother doesn't know any other way. Marion snorted. "I don't think I can be that understanding. She's forgotten about us, for goodness sake." And then her voice softened as she looked at her nephew. "Even sweet Tobias, her handsome grandson, if only Papa was still alive." "If Papa was still alive, neither of us would still be here," Lillian reminded her. "Here, let me take these in." Lillian carried the peas into the kitchen. It was 5 in the evening, and she wanted to get dinner started. Marion had already peeled the potatoes and prepared everything else. All that was needed was to put it over the fire. Just then, the front door creaked open and David entered. "How's my favorite lady?" he asked. That her husband loved her was never in doubt. He showed her in the way he spoke to her, looked at her, and touched her. "All's well, thank you. How was your day?" Lillian watched David go to the sink out of the corner of her eye. "It was good. Got a lot done with the 2 additional ranch hands. The fence on the northern side is all done, so we can move the herd there tomorrow." He came up behind her and encircled her expanding waist. Lillian giggled when he nuzzled her neck. "I love you, my beautiful wife," he said. "And I you, my darling," Lillian said. Tobias toddled in, followed by Marion. On seeing his parents embracing, he joined them and hugged Lillian's legs. Lillian smiled at her sister, and they exchanged an understanding look. God had been truly good to them. They had a new family now. Lillian would always be grateful, especially when she recalled how close she came to losing them.